Hello, my name is Lee and welcome to this video series on learning blueprints. In this video series, we're going to take a systematic look at learning the blueprint system and look at all the various different parts and pieces to create our very own blueprints. In this first video, we're going to take a look at how we can create our very first blueprints, the different type of blueprint classes, as well as the overall interface of the blueprints editor. So with that in mind, let's begin and get started. To create a blueprint, we simply have to right click within the content browser and we can choose this option here that says blueprint class. When we choose the blueprint class, you can see we are presented with some options as to which type of class we want to choose. Now next to each class, we can see that it gives a short description of what each one does, but to quickly run through them, it is as follows. An actor is a type of blueprint that we would create whenever we want to interact with an object within our scene. A pawn and a character blueprint are blueprints that we would create if we want to possess something, meaning that we want to control them. The slight difference here is that a character has some attributes that are already pre-built into it, such as the ability to walk or jump. Next up, we have a player controller, and this is a blueprint that allows us to set some initial properties for our player and how to control it. After that, we have the game mode, and so we want to use this blueprint whenever we want to set the rules of our game. So you can imagine that perhaps you create a capture the flag game and you want to set those initial rules for the game. You would do that here in the game mode. Next up, we have the actor component, which is a blueprint actor that we can create that we can use to attach to other parts of different blueprints. And then we have the scene component, which allows us to attach things, again similar to the actor component, to various different blueprints. The difference here is that the actor component gives us access to the transformation data. And then below that, you can see we have all classes, and if we click on this, we can have an extended view of some other types of classes that we can create. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to keep with the top ones here, and we're going to create our very first blueprint, and we're going to choose the option for actor. When we do that, it will ask us to create a name, so we're going to call it BP_my actor. You can really name this anything you want, it doesn't really matter, but for the purposes of the tutorial, I'm going to call it my actor. Now if I were to double click on this and then double click on the top of the menu to expand it, we get presented with the blueprints editor. So let's start from the top and work our way around. Along the top is access to the most common commands that we'd like to use within the blueprints editor. The first two is compile and save. Now the difference between these two is that the compile actually compiles the code, and so when you run your game, it will execute the blueprint. Save merely just saves the progress that you've made within the blueprint so far and doesn't necessarily compile the information. Next up is browse, and what browse does is it will allow us to find the location of this current blueprint. Then we have this option that says diff to previous revisions, and what it's going to do is it's going to compare this to previous revisions of the same blueprint. Then we have the find, and in order for us to see what this is doing, we need to go to the graph view. Now the graph view, as we can see right here, is where most of the work that we're going to be doing within blueprints is going to occur. It is where we're going to create our nodes. These things right here are called nodes. Now I'm going to select these ones and press the delete key, and I'm going to create a node for the purposes of this demonstration, and we're going to find event begin play. Now don't worry what this does right now, we'll look at all these different nodes in future videos, but for now I just want to show you what this does. Now we can imagine that we are creating our blueprint and we have a few things running along the execution pins here, and we are perhaps somewhere all the way over here and really far away from a particular node. Now we want to find a particular node. We can press the find button, and at the very bottom here we'll see a search input, and we can put some search in it. So we're going to type in event, right, because we want to find the event begin play. So I'm just going to type event here, and you can see event begin play appears. If we double click on this, it will maximize or change the location of the view so we can see where that is. Great, so moving on from that, we have the class settings and class defaults. So the class settings and class defaults allow us to change the settings of the class itself. The difference here is that here we have some defaults, and then here we have some specific settings related to different options. Again, we're not going to worry too much about what this does right now, but in the future videos we will look at what they do bit by bit. Now after that we have simulation, and then we have the play buttons. What these basically do is allow us to simulate or to execute our code here within the graph view, and we can see the flow of how the graph is working. Okay, so after that we're going to go just below that, and we can see we have viewports, construction, and graph. So the viewport is where we can see any objects that we put into our blueprint, such as models, textures, and materials. The construction script is where we're going to create functions for our blueprint. And the graph view, as we've just seen, is where we can create the nodes and execute the code. Most of our work will be here within this graph view. So let's jump over to the viewport here. And on the left hand side we have this big button here that says add. If we click on this, we get access to the things that we can add to our blueprint. We can add things like geometry, things like collision boxes, and really a whole range of different things in here. We're not going to talk about each and every one of those things right now, but just so you know, this is where we would add all of the different components to our blueprint. Below that we can see a list, and this is a list of the things that are already within the blueprint as it is right now. So after that we can see just below the list that we can click this button that says add, and this will allow us to add things such as variables or functions into our blueprint. These are the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this series, but for now this is where we would add those things. And then below that are the different categories of the different types of variables that we can add, and the variables that we create will appear in the appropriate category. So on the right hand side we have the details panel, and the details panel is going to display any properties of a particular object that we have selected, and is going to allow us to make some basic changes. For example, the size of the object, the rotation, location, what kind of material it is, and even swap the model itself, or whatever the component is, we can swap it here. And at the very bottom we have the compile results, and what this is going to do is it's going to show us any errors or any problems that we have with our blueprints when we go to compile it. So if I press compile, you're going to see we've got this message here that essentially says that there is no issues with our blueprints. So that's the very basics and outline of the blueprint editor. In the next video, we're going to look at creating variables and the different type of variables that we can create and when we would use them. But until the next time, thank you for watching, and bye bye for now.